You can start it. It's live now.
Awesome. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nabil Wayani, and I am the newcomer employment specialist with Immigrant Services Calgary. And I like to welcome all the participants here today, as well as those who are joining us on live, Facebook Live. So I like to welcome all for our today's webinar. Can credit history affect your employment in Canada? Okay. So before we start, I would like to say thank you to our funder, IRCC. So without the support of Immigration, Refugee and Citizenship Canada, we won't be able to bring all these services and workshops to you. So thanks a lot, IRCC, for your continuous support. Now, before we begin officially, a few house rules we have to go through. Number one, please keep your microphone on mute so it won't disturb our presenter for today. Please keep your camera turned off as we are going live on Facebook. So I will request you all to please keep your camera off all time. No abusive language will be tolerated, obviously. Please do not post any personal information in the chat box. We encourage you all to ask as many questions as you want to ask from our presenter. And please hold your question till the end of the session, and then you can type in the chat box and our presenter will take questions turn by turn. An evaluation link will be sent out at the end of the workshop, and we really appreciate your feedback because it's your feedback ensure us to give a better quality workshops. So I will really encourage you all to please fill those evaluation forms. It's very important. And last but not the least, please attend today's webinar. Please use the name which you use to register for this webinar. Okay, so if you have using any other name, so I will request you all to please correct it and put the same name as you use for the registration of this webinar. So at this point, I would like to introduce to you our today's presenter, Margaret Adequately. Margaret Adequately is the founder and chief executive officer of City Lending Center, a credit building solution company. Margaret has worked in the banking industry for 20 years, and her passion for progress and dedication to her community has been universally praised by her friends and colleagues alike. She has seen the struggle immigrants face and experienced them firsthand, driving her forward to take action and uplift her community so that nobody will have to endure their struggle alone. She founded Immigrant Inclusive Credit to tackle the complex struggle with systematic racism and financial insecurities that immigrants are forced to adapt as they integrate into Alberta's ecosystem. So thanks a lot, Margaret, for taking time out for us from your busy schedule and coming here and sharing your expertise and all your experience with all the participants today. And I'm sure the information which we are going to get today from you will be helpful for all of us. So without any further delay, over to you, Margaret. Thank you.
Thank you, Nabil. Thank you so much for having me once again. I feel like a part of the family already. I think I've been a speaker with ISC a few times. I feel like I'm an employee as well. So thank you for having me. Anything that has to do with immigrants, diversity and inclusion excites me. And there are so many reasons why that is. As you can tell, I'm a Black woman from Nigeria, West Africa. I came to Canada in 2000. So I've been here for 22 years. And I know a few of you will go, wow, that's a long time. Before we know it, we'll be saying the same thing for you, right? A newcomer will be asking you, how long have you been here? And you'll be telling them a few years. So I started my banking career with PC Financial. You know, when you go into President Choice, one of those people running after you to apply for MasterCard. That's how I started. And from there, I went to TD, to CIBC. So I've had the opportunity to work at the big banks. I think 5. I've worked at 4 of the 5 big banks, and I've worked at 2 credit unions. I've had the opportunity to be a branch manager for 11 years. I'll be very, very honest with you. A lot of the policies that, you know, most of the banking or financial institutions have are already in place. Most of them were already in place before we immigrants came on board. So that is Margaret in a nutshell. Been in Canada for going to 22 years, work in the banking industry for 20 years. And my presentation today will be focused on what I know how to speak about the most, credit. Credit. I'm going to be talking about credit. After I left the bank in June, July last year, and I started a company called City Lending Centers. And one of the reasons why this company was started is to bridge the gap that I saw while working in the bank. A lot of immigrants would come into the country, and most banks has immigrant packages, which most of you probably have already. The immigrant package includes a $2,000 credit card and a $5,000 line of credit. The challenge that I see is that few immigrants accepting these packages might not get a job or get jobs on time. And a few of them are falling behind on those payments. What now happens is that when you begin to fall behind on some of those packages given to you by the banks when you arrive, it might have an impact when you're applying for jobs, which is why we're having this conversation today. Can your credit history impact your background check, or will it not? And if it does impact it, how is it? How come it impacted? How does it impact it? We're going to talk about all that. But before we go into the background check piece and how credit affects your background check, let's quickly talk about what credit history is. A few of you already know what credit history is. We all know that your credit history includes your credit card information, your balance, your available credit, and your payment history. Your credit history also tells us in the bank, when I was in the bank, your credit history also tells people how long you've lived in a place. So all your addresses, everywhere you've ever lived in, shows on your credit report. That's if it's updated by your bank. For most time, we see it on your credit report. We can see all the employers you've worked for. And the few things we don't see on your credit report is your blood type. That's a joke, by the way. Your blood type is not there, but most of your information as a consumer is on your credit report. So your credit history has everything, every information that you've given your bank will be on your credit history. But when you look at your credit score is a 3-digit number, which is the first thing any company will look at or any lender will look at when you apply for anything. And of course, if a background check is going on, the first thing they would see is those 3 digits. Those 3 digits basically sums up your credit history, which of course, like I said, includes how many credit cards do you have, how many line of credits do you have, how do you use them? All that gets summed up in those 3 digits. Going to the next slide. Now to the main event, why you're all here. Why does employers need to check your credit report? A lot of employers, in fact, I would say maybe 86%. Some people are under the impression that it's only banks or investment companies that checks your credit report. There are some government organizations that will check your credit reports when you apply for jobs. There are investment companies that will check your credit report. As a new immigrant, if you're trying to do a lot of things, rent a house, rent cars, a lot of people check your credit report. Don't forget, most of us, when you go do anything or apply for anything or anytime you have to sign a document, a lot of people don't spend the time to read those fine lines. There are people that might check your credit report that you don't even know they are checking your credit report because you already checked off a box to say, yes, go ahead, without it being disclosed to you. This just speaks volume to how important your credit history is. You practically cannot do anything without your credit report. So 86% or more of employers will pull your credit reports according to HR.com. So why do they check your credit report? 3 major reasons I like to say is why they check. When an employer checks your credit report, they are looking at late payments. What does late payments say about your character when you're looking for a job? If you've had late payments, it might show that you're not organized, or it might show that you don't meet up to your obligations. Is this even legal? Some of you might be thinking. It is absolutely legal, right? It's absolutely legal. I've been working in the bank for 20 years. I will give you just a quick short story. I had an employee as a branch manager at one point who's worked with us for like a year, around a year. And she was also doing her MBA at the time. It so happened that this particular employee would take, so when a senior comes to the branch to change their debit card, she would change the debit card, but give them back the old one. And she would go on a shopping spree. And we didn't figure that out for a long time. But when we finally figured it out, what we had to do is put certain information on her. So if she were to go work for another bank and they pull her credit report or do a background check, they would know that she's done something shady with us. So a lot of employers would check your credit report to see if you have late payments, just to determine your character. They will check to see if you have excessive debt. That's number two. First one is late payments. Number two is excessive debt. Well, it's subjective, right? Excessive debt is subjective. It could be, you could have excessive debt because you're new to the country, you're trying to settle down, you've collected some loans that will help you settle down, you have car loans, maybe you have student loans. So should you be judged based on the level of debt that you have as a candidate, as a job candidate? Humanly speaking, no. But the reality is that yes, they do. And one of the reasons why they will look at excessive debt is to gauge the likelihood of that person being fraudulent. Back to the story of the employee that I shared earlier on, right? When we initially put that employee's credit, it was probably nice and clean. But somewhere in between, our expenses became way too much. I know that at one point, this particular employee took a tour of Europe. She went to watch some major World Cup with her boyfriend. Maybe that's the time as a branch manager, that's when I should have gone back to repull her credit. But you know, you wouldn't think of those things. So employers will check for excessive debt. And they are checking to see if that employee has a likelihood to misuse customers' information or the likelihood to steal or do fraudulent activities. They will also check how you handle your own money. They are trying to see how you handle your money. How many credit cards, how many lines of credit do you have? And what is your usage level? How much of those credit are you using? They will look at something like that in order to gauge somebody's need for money. How much do you need cash? And why are you constantly getting so many credit? Those are some of the major reasons why employers would want to look into your credit, really is to kind of gauge the character of that candidate. So they will check your credit for security purposes. The credit reports can be used to verify somebody's identity, your background, and your education. Maybe the education piece, not too much, because on your credit report, it doesn't say which school you attended or anything about your educational background, but it does have your identity. It has every information about you as an individual. Like I said earlier, I set your blood type. They do not prevent theft or embezzlement. Checking your credit, again, I gave you an example of an employee that we hired who later was fraudulent. So checking your credit does not prevent an employee from mishandling information, but it gives an employer an idea of who that person is. Now let's go to understanding your credit information. Now we all have an idea, at least an idea of why employers would check our credit. I can summarize that again if you want. They are checking to see if you're trustworthy. They're checking to see that this person will not be fraudulent. They're also checking to see you don't have too much debt. They're checking to see that you don't have too many credit open, and they're checking to see the usage of that credit in order to gauge the kind of person that you are. Now, do you understand your own credit? it's very, very important that you understand your own credit in order to manage it well and to keep it clean. And I'm going to share with you, because a few people still don't understand when we say revolving credit. People are wondering, what is a revolving credit? A revolving credit is any kind of credit that you can use, put the money in and use again, such as your credit card and your lines of credit. Those two are revolving credit. A loan is an installment loan where you get the loan and you start paying back immediately. So anytime you get the opportunity to look at your credit, when you see L, it means it's a loan. When you see R, it means it's a revolving credit. And for some of you, when you look at your credit, you will see the R will say R1 or R2. Employers are looking to see that you have R1s. R1 means you're making your payments as expected. That means you have the ability to keep up with your obligations, right? They can use that to gauge if this employee will be a straightforward person, or maybe this employee will not be a straightforward person. Because if you're somebody whose credit is at, let's say, R3, right? R3 means you probably missed a payment 3-4 times. And you know what? People will miss payment for so many reasons, like I was saying earlier on. Maybe you're a new immigrant. They gave you $2,000 credit card when you first open up your bank account at RBC. However, maybe you didn't get a job on time. If you don't get a job on time and the credit card is used, there is nothing you can do. But the challenge there is that situations like that would impact your credit, and they will stay on your credit report for a while. If you have R1, R2 on your credit report, it could be on there for up to 6 years. So we want to be very, very careful about missed payments on your credit report. So R1 means that you're paying your payments as you should within 30 days. By the time it gets to R2, R2 means it's taking you more than 30 days to pay your bills. When it starts getting to R3, R4, then there is a problem. And if your credit ever shows an R5 or R7, the way we read that in the banking world is that there is already an issue with that person's credit. And of course, anytime you see an R9, again, you might not see it because you don't check your credit on time, but if there's a background check, an employer is looking through your credit report and they see an R9, then they automatically know that this person is not managing their credit properly. This is another very important part that I want to share with you today. When you have, let's say, inquiries, if people are pulling your credit, and there are two types of credit pulling, there's the soft pull and there is the hard pull. The soft pull does not affect your credit in any way. The soft pull is only done when you're opening accounts. Anytime you have to apply for anything, or when an employer pulls your credit, it usually shows as a hard pull. So when inquiries on your credit will be there for 3 years. So if I, as a lender, if I were to go into your credit, I will see how many people has pulled your credit and how many times they've pulled the credit. And those hard pulls affect your credit scores, which is the 3-digit numbers that I spoke about earlier on. If for any reason you have a judgment, if there's a judgment against you, for example, maybe you borrowed money from somewhere, you forgot to pay about it, and they take you to court, that stays on your credit for a minimum of 6 years. If you're in collections, and believe you me, so many people are in collections more than expected and they don't even know. For new immigrants, for a few that I see when I was in the bank, maybe you collected a phone from TELUS or from Bell Canada, and you moved from that location to another location. If you forget to return their equipment, they might take you to collections without you even knowing that you're in collections, which is why we always advise people, try to check your credit from time to time. There are ways that you can check your credit, and I will mention that as we go on. So collections will stay on your credit. Collections will stay on your credit for 6 years. When you apply for things, it stays on your credit for another 6 years. Why are these things important? They're important because these are the information that an employer would see when they pull your credit. Okay, taking you through. So credit scores. Credit scores range from 300 to 900. Yeah, and there are people, well, I've not seen any people with a credit score of 900 since I've been in the banking world, but I've seen 800 and a little more than 800. So let's take a minute to look at the characteristics of credit. Give me a second, I can't. So your payment history. Your payment history is the biggest part of your credit report. So please make sure that you make your payment on time. If possible, make your payment within the grace period. If any of you have ever heard about grace period, anyone that has a credit card, really, credit card is like a free loan. If you pay your credit card within 25 days of using it, you're not paying any interest rate. So make sure you're making your payment on time. Another big part of your credit report or your credit history is the utilization. Utilization takes up 30%. So your credit score, the 3 digits credit score that you have, 30% of what contributes to that score is your utilization. As a new immigrant, when the bank gives you a new immigrant package, which is a credit card with $2,000 limit, you want to make sure that you don't use more than 800, or at least not more than 50% of that credit limit. Anytime you use over 50%, it kind of impacts your credit score negatively. Your credit risk, the kind of credit that you have also has an impact on your credit. A few people are not aware of that. There are people that goes to maybe payday loans often, like Easy Financial. If you have lots of loans from Easy Financial, maybe lots of loans from those little companies, it does have a kind of impact on your credit report. If you have more questions, you can feel free to ask me when I'm done with my presentation. Sorry, I just want to spend a few more minutes there. With the utilization, with your credit utilization, you want to make sure that if possible, you want to make sure that you stay below, because I know earlier I said at least 50%, stay below 50% as much as you possibly can. That is all I have when it comes to credit report, what employer says. So I'm going to take a quick minute and I will do a quick recap about what I said, everything that I've talked about so far about credit history. So we talked about what credit history is, and we talked about credit score. I told you why employers would check your credit, and the 3 biggest points that I mentioned was they are looking for late payments. They want to see if you have excessive debt, and they want to know that you're not mishandling your credit report, your credit as a person. Employers are also looking to see what your credit ratings look like, in the sense of, is your credit rating R1, is it R2, is it R3? The reason why they will look at what those numbers is because they want to know if you're somebody who keeps to your obligations. And finally, we also talked about how long negative information will stay on your credit. So let's be very, very careful with collections item. If for any reason you're ever in a situation where you have something in collections, please work with them. A lot of people will avoid that call. If you get a call from a collections department, pick up the phone, make arrangements with them. make arrangements with them, tell them what you have. For most parts, they would accept what you have. So please don't avoid collections calls because it impacts your credit and it stays on your credit for 6 years. And finally, your credit scores. A good credit score will be between 620. 620 is good for mortgages, but I would say from 650 upwards, it looks good. When your credit score is around 650 and above, at least it could tell an employer that, okay, your credit is still okay, it's fine. Before they start looking at the detail, the first things they see is those 3-digit scores. And the things that affect it are the things that we talked about earlier. Okay, and finally, I'm going to take a minute to tell you what Margaret does. So if you're somebody who finds yourself in a situation where your credit is already challenged, we don't like to call it bad credit, we like to say challenged. If your credit is slightly challenged, that is where my company comes in, City Lending Centers. As a new immigrant, is very surprising, and you'll be surprised of a lot of people that I've met who are new to the country and their credits are already challenged. Some of them is to no fault of theirs. I've met a new immigrant who accepted the new immigrants package at all the banks. And BMO, most of the 5 major banks, they all have the new immigrants package. There was this particular immigrant that I met who accepted all the packages from all the banks, and which comes with the credit card, the lines of credit. And the unexpected piece of that individual story was that they used all the credit too. The individual had sent some of the money home to start a project. And the challenge there was that individual, well, I believe her, that individual said she didn't realize she needed to pay back all that money. And I think the reason why she believed that is because most of the people you talk to in the bank, they don't take the time to explain the process to you. And really, it's not their fault too. A lot of them don't have the in-depth knowledge about how credit really works. A lot of the people you're dealing with in the bank are salespeople. Their job is to sell you those products, open up those products for you. They really don't know how to take you through or give you an in-depth insight to what credit is. So with City Lending Centers, we provide education, which is part of what I'm doing here today. We provide lots of credit educations. We provide tools to help you understand your credit. And most importantly, for people that are just coming to Canada and they've not yet built credit, what we're advising them to do is to get a secured credit card. Excuse me. What we're advising you to do is to get a secure credit card. With a secure credit card, you're using your own money. You're spending your own money while building credit. So for any reason, let's say you get a secure credit card, you max it out because you're trying to settle down, it's only fair. And let's say you can't find a job. The worst thing that would happen with the secure credit card is that we take that security, we apply it to the current debt, and it's paid off. That way you don't have bad credit. So at City Lending Centers, our main product is this secure credit card that I'm showing you right now. It's a secured Visa card, and everybody is approved, everybody's qualified. But the important part of it is that you're not getting into debt. Your money is what you're spending while you're building credit. If you have more questions, feel free to ask me later. And like I said earlier, why a secure credit card is because you can control your own spending. It's your own money and you're still building credit while you're using it. And that's pretty much all I have. If you have any questions about what we've discussed so far, I am on LinkedIn. I'm still Margaret Adekunle. If you want more information about the secure credit card I showed you earlier, you can go to www.citylendingcenters.ca or you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. So let's talk about credit and employer and background check. Please ask your questions or type it in the chat and I'll be more than glad to answer them all.
Thank you, Margaret, for this wonderful presentation. So Nabil, I think we can say bye to the Facebook audience now.
Okay, yeah, at this point, thanks a lot, Margaret, for a great presentation, and it was very detailed. People see credit check only from other perspective rather than the employment perspective, and I think it was very good everyone for all the participants that they have to look from that perspective as well. At this point, we would like to say goodbye to our audience on Facebook, and after that, we will going to take the last question from the audience here at the Zoom.